The Evil Within plays like Shinji Mikami's personal greatest hits of horror games. As an experience, it can also be a smash hit or a total disappointing miss. Which of these two camps will you fall into? Honestly, this is going to depend largely on what your expectations for your experience with The Evil Within are, what you think a good horror game should be, and if you're prepared for more than a bit of chaos. Horror games take many forms, from the atmospheric, heavy vibes and unique top-down perspective of Darkwood, to the creepy, tense dread of what lurks unseen around us in Fatal Frame. Resident Evil has been immersing us in everything from standard zombie apocalypse fare to hillbilly horror a la Rob Zombie, or even 10 feet tall Dommy-mommy vampires that turn into a freaking dragon when it's that time of the month. My first brush with a horror game was Clock Tower back on the PlayStation 1, where I was relentlessly chased by a psychopath with an enormous pair of scissors, and to this day I detest games where I can only run away from whatever lurks in the shadows, and I have a general distrust of garden shears. Even games such as Subnautica and The Outer Wilds, two perfectly benign, non-horror games, have their own form of terror and dread baked into their deceptively dark cores. You can totally check out two videos that I did on these games, they'll be linked in the description below, or in the corner above, or maybe over here, I don't really know. These horror games play toward different fears and phobias and ways to experience terror. And The Evil Within has an approach all its own, harnessing the raw, unbridled, blood-soaked chaos that only a mind like Shinji Mikami could make. The Evil Within embraces a straight balls-to-the-blood-spattered wall philosophy. It's a horror game that is fiercely all killers, no fillers.
Find myself within darkness twisting me. There is nothing I can do. This wild doesn't spread. It just does.
Spoilers, nerds, I'm going to explore quite a bit of The Evil Within. There's going to be tons of plot spoilers and even more visual spoilers. Go play The Evil Within if you haven't already, because it is freaking wild, and even 8 years on, it is still amply worth your time. Now let's get on with it. The Evil Within is dense and sorting through the many layers of its narrative, the wide variety of unique set pieces, and the themes and how they cross over from narrative to gameplay is daunting to say the least. There are so many details crammed into The Evil Within, be they notes and collectibles that you can miss entirely, or fleeting offhand quips in the dialogue that could be nothing or could be a fundamental story detail. And all of these elements are loosely connected at best, seemingly random, or even worse, only noticeable to the most diligent and sharp-eyed detective. Which, given our main character, there's something appropriate about the game turning our brain into this.
Now let's talk about the mail. Can we talk about the mail, please, Mac? I'm dying to talk about the mail with you all day, okay? Pepe Sylvia. This name keeps coming up over and over again. Every day, Pepe's mail's getting sent back to me. Pepe Sylvia, Pepe Sylvia. I look in the mail, well, this whole box is Pepe Sylvia. So I say to myself, I gotta find this guy. I gotta go up to his office. I gotta put his mail in the guy's goddamn hands. Otherwise, he's never gonna get it. He's gonna keep coming back down here. So I go up to Pepe's office, and what do I find out, Mac? What do I find out? There is no Pepe Sylvia.
I'm not going to do a deep dive analysis examining how to uncover all of these minuscule little details, nor am I going to connect all the imperceivable little dots to form an actual cohesive narrative, and I'm definitely not going to cover the collective unconscious, the melding of minds, or the manipulation of psychological energies, because trust me, all of that is in The Evil Within, and it's honestly fascinating. But there's a good deal of these analyses already made and by better detectives than me, so I'm going to leave this up to those more qualified. More than the specifics of the narrative and how The Evil Within takes on disjointed storytelling, I'm interested in exploring the nature of the game itself and how it uses variety, intensity, and an at times frantic pace to keep its horrifying and scary moments constant, overwhelming, uncomfortable, and fresh. where many horror games slow things to a crawl in an effort to heighten tension and atmosphere, drawing you in and making you really sit in the anticipation of the wickedness awaiting to strike from the shadows. Shinji Mikami says, nah, fuck all that noise, let's just terrorize players through sheer unrelenting sensory overload. Let's take a look at the opening sequence in the first few chapters of The Evil Within so we can get a good feel of just how much horrible, bizarre shit unfolds. We play as Detective Sebastian Castellanos. Sebastian is old and an alcoholic, but mostly just old. We respond to a call at Beacon Mental Health Hospital. We've barely started the prologue of the game and there's already enough dead bodies in the lobby to fill the quota of your average slasher flick. Sebastian spots this hooded asshole on a camera, then he's behind him, and that's an awful big needle, and Sebastian wakes up somewhere else, strung upside down with a bunch of other bodies and the world's most sus butcher doing some creative food processing. Sebastian escapes and has to sneak around avoiding the big burly meat man, but only for a little bit before he severs Sebastian's Achilles tendon and sends him limping down this hallway with these horrible traps, and why is any of this here? Sebastian goes down a meat slide and into a vat of people soup. Delicious! After wandering through the sewers, Sebastian climbs an unnecessarily long ladder.
What a thrill with darkness and silence through the night.
Plays hide and seek with our chainsaw-wielding butcher friend, stumbles down a hall with far too many inconveniently placed wheelchairs, barely makes it into an elevator before rolling credits on the intro with one of the most banger opening songs ever.
Jokes tied in the noose.
And that was just the intro. We haven't even gotten to the ambulance race through the city that is self-destructing and falling apart all around you, the crash that nobody had any business surviving, waking up in a mental hospital, and then in the burning wreckage of the ambulance in the middle of a dark, scary woods. And this guy is a zombie, and these villagers are zombies, but holy shit, there's a bunch of them, and they chase you across a bridge. And for Sebastian, who has handled like a rusted out World War I tank up until this point, by the way, to make an incredibly nimble leap into the water to escape the horde. And did I mention that his totally severed Achilles tendon seems to be perfectly functional now? Give me a minute, that was a lot. And then you take on a whole village of them and climb another endless ladder.
What a fear in my heart.
And then fight and kill Chainsaw Butcher Man in a violent battle, throwing all of your resources at his big ugly face before turning him into a literal red mist and heading even deeper into the village. And then, okay, no, I'm not going to go through the events of the whole game like this. But we've got to talk about this blood hallway, this long-haired nightmare lady, waking up in our third mental hospital and fighting invisible face eaters, blood puzzles, the real ladder.
I give my life, not for honor, but for you.
This room, blood portals, freaky long-haired spider lady returns, scenic views, our partner losing his head, ogres, medieval torture puzzles, lab experiments, the world's ugliest and angriest dog, aggressive telekinesis, and then waking up in a tomb, more trap hallways. This safe head asshole hunts you through a series of locked off rooms, and if you kill him, he respawns into a whole new safe guy. And if he can't reach you, he will unalive himself to respawn to another version of himself who can reach you. And what? Why is this a feature? Holy sh! This guy has intestinal parasites on steroids. Two-headed baby zombies attack you and you have to stomp them out. I'm gonna need another minute. Sebastian goes from caves to a hospital and then finds the doc in this tub machine and then hallucinates the world's creepiest brain. Then we go back to the mental hospital that has been serving as our safe haven save point. But oh wait, the hooded Professor X wannabe can get us in the safe room? Sebastian wakes up, tied up, gets burnt alive in a Children of the Corn style field. Our safe room starts getting even creepier. We probe the bisected brains of heads that appear to still be alive in a haunted mansion while Hood Boy hunts us, and we watch the ghost of his memories, and we get sprayed down by safe blood, and there's more. There's so much more. We're only like a little over halfway through the game. We haven't even got back to the city for fuck's sake, and this isn't even the weirdest stuff yet. But you get the point. I can't continue to cover this beat for beat. It's just too much. My heart can't take all this hype. But I can show you a brutal Sebastian death montage. Roll it! We still haven't reached the full-on crazy town that the evil within turns into. Yet we've already contended with more than some games throw at us during their entire runtime, and all of it with virtually no answers or explanation or even the resemblance of sense or logical order. If you aren't wondering what the fuck is going on by this point, then you're either a far better detective than me or you're a liar. As the game progresses, it becomes increasingly out of control as the absolute roller coaster of macabre and horrific events build momentum, and you better hold on tight because this ride has zero interest in ever touching the brakes. This is all by purposeful design. The full lean into chaos, confusion, and the ever-changing nature of the game are all laced into the workings of the game's plot, themes, and gameplay, even when it seems like entirely random nonsense. As I said, there's actually some deep layers of connection and purpose behind a lot of the events unfolding in The Evil Within. Sure, the interconnected web is gossamer thin and easily missed if you haven't been intentionally doing some digging throughout, but it is there. The beauty though is that you don't actually have to be looking for these deeper details in order to enjoy the game. In fact, as was the case for me, it might be a more enjoyable experience if you don't. I played The Evil Within shortly after its initial release all the way back in 2014. And although the game was great and I did enjoy it, as things progressively unfolded and I went deeper and deeper into the wretched, disturbing, gore-filled hellscape of mental gymnastics and aggressive mindfuckery that was The Evil Within, the more discontented I got. Not because the game was bad, far from it. Admittedly, the game does show some aging and the gameplay has some rough edges and minor jank that most modern titles have since smoothed off. And yes, I'm talking about the uncancelable animations. Why the fuck can Sebastian not, I don't know, stop fumbling around with a match when there is a twisted abomination of metal and flesh barreling down at him with all the fury of Beelzebub himself? And levers, the levers. Leave the levers alone, Sebastian. There's an amalgamation of meat right freaking there in front of you, and it is fueled by raw hunger, and the only thing on the freaking menu is you! What was I saying? Whether you played it in 2014 or you're playing it in 2022, The Evil Within is an amazing game. I wouldn't call it revolutionary to the genre or anything, but it was just so damn good, so well executed, and it had a level of polish and passion and raw, glossy finish to the graphics and art direction that you hardly ever saw at the time. Still, when I initially played it, something just did not click for me. It was me. When I played The Evil Within all those years ago, I had a subconscious expectation of a certain degree of linearity. I expected a story that I could follow and understand in an orderly sequence of events. A strong central plotline that would tie everything together. You know, a standard narrative experience. If you've played The Evil Within, you know that it may be a great many things, but linear and told in orderly sequence is not on the list. A few weeks ago, as of this recording, I played through The Evil Within again. This time, I knew the game was going to be chaos. I let go of any notion of the game following order or logic or reason, any of it. And I decided that this time around, I was going to be fine with that. My entire experience changed. I've come to realize the evil within's fundamental truth. To maximize enjoyment of the evil within, you have to approach the game with an open mind. This seems so obvious as to be redundant, but for the evil within, it is especially essential because the game is going to demand you really bear with the eccentricities of its storytelling. Maybe I'm the only one who initially struggled to shift my point of view enough to see what the evil within was doing, but I imagine there are other people who looked at the wildly tangled mass of sinew and flayed flesh that was the evil within's narrative and just didn't know how to go about untangling it all. The secret is, of course, to not try to untangle the evil within's horrid, fleshy ball of gore at all. Sure, you can do that if you try. There's an intriguing plot and body of lore to put together dealing with some fairly deep and engaging psychological themes. But when I gave up on trying to chase down the threads of these themes and plot points, and instead fully devoted myself to enjoying the minute-by-minute spectacle rapidly unfolding one after the other before me, I found my enjoyment increasing as rapidly as the raw crazy of the game itself. After finally replaying the game many years later, I appreciate the chaos and wild balls-to-the-wall energy of the Evil Within. It feels like the overall goal of the Evil Within was to pack the game with as many of the most intense and terrifying encounters possible, with little regard for how the game gets from one deviously horrifying moment to the next. And I think when the player embraces the spirit of give me the good stuff all the time, the game is an immensely better experience for it. Shinji Mikami has always made wildly over-the-top, eclectic games regardless of what genre the game falls into. With The Evil Within, Mikami gave us the gift of an all-killers, no-fillers horror game. And what a deliciously vicious group of killers they are.